All right. Let's see how we're doing today. Oh, there we go. So let's see here. Let's make sure everybody can hear me. You should see the first slide and just go ahead and let me know if you can hear me in that chat box so that I know you are with us and that everything's working well. That would be really helpful. And hello, Becky. You get the prize for being the first one here. I'm wondering, I've never offered a daytime webinar before, but we did have quite a few people sign up. And so if this works well and you don't have to give up your evening, that is fabulous. Well, hello, Kyle. Welcome. Welcome. So good to see you here. And what we will do is, if you don't mind, just letting me know, Becky and Kyle, if you can hear. I see lots of people are starting to come in on my analytics. So we're not going to get started quite yet, but I will kind of be jibber jabbering so that we can check and make sure that you can hit me. You can hear me. You can hear me, and that you can see that first slide where it says Algebra in 1 year, making the pieces fit. And there is a delay. So there is probably, Kyle put his little hello in there and I didn't say something for a couple minutes. That should give you an idea of the delay. They say it's between 30 seconds and 2 minutes, and that can feel really long sometimes. So if you are feeling like I'm not answering your questions, please remember there's a delay there. And if you do have questions, throw them in the chat box, because that way when I do pause, I'm not waiting for you to put the questions in. You hit play and it is doing nothing. Let's see. I wonder if it would let me copy. Let's see. So you have to hit. Oh, that's great news, Becky. I'm glad you can hear now, and hopefully you can see. I'll switch the slides here real quick and make sure, like, I'm just moving it up and down, checking how long the delay is for myself too. So it varies with how busy Google is. So that, okay, it was probably about 30 seconds to a minute. Not too bad. Oh, nice, Kyle, Missouri. Wonderful. And I'm wondering, while we're waiting, I see people coming in. Welcome, Cliff. What I'm wondering is, do you teach algebra in 8th grade or 9th grade? And that'll just kind of help me make sure that you get the information you're looking for. If you don't mind letting me know. And I see people coming in, those numbers are going up, and I can see them on my analytics before you guys probably see them at that end. 8th grade, great, Kyle, because we're going to really focus on how to fit those 8th grade standards in that time crunch. Nevada sounds so wonderfully warm right now. Although in Michigan, it's not too cold. We hit 70 yesterday, which is a big milestone for us. Cliff, you're also 8th grade. Great. Becky, I'm wondering how your private school works with all of that. Welcome, Heather. In Connecticut. Great. So if you're at the middle school, I'm going to jump to conclusions and assume you're in 8th grade. That would be all right. Bethany, welcome. Missouri and 8th grade. Wonderful. So I'm wondering, Kyle and Bethany, if you know each other. So you're not. like to say not too far apart, but honestly, I do not know. Oh, that makes sense, Becky. So you're all online and work with several grades. That must be a different kind of challenge. I would think that would be very challenging to keep them motivated when you can't see their eyeballs. Um, Great. We are going to wait just a couple minutes because I'm seeing some people are still coming in. I do expect a smaller crowd, but I thought if you don't have to give up your evening with your family, that's great with me. So I know it can be so hard because things are always offered after the teaching schedule. And I didn't know if this worked with lunch or a prep hour. I thought we would try it. So I'm glad it's working out for you folks. Oh, so they're right there on campus. Oh, 2.5 hours apart. Yep, that's what I was wondering. Everybody assumes like because I'm from Michigan, I'm in downtown Detroit, which I am not. Um, Not too far, but now my life is a little bit further away. So just getting that set up, and I'm hoping you can hear me. I feel like you guys are answering the questions I'm asking, so I'm kind of doing that online test. I'm just going to put something in the chat box in case anybody's watching and they can't hear me, just to make sure we're ready to roll. I feel like we're doing really well right now. So no technical difficulties so far, knock on wood. So that's fabulous. So let's make sure. Great. So I'm really excited to go through this webinar because it has kind of been always a struggle for me. And I had some really specific things that were really tough. And so when I was going through this, I can tell you some of the experiences I had and how I kind of learned to get through those. So just a couple housekeeping things real quick before we get started. I'm going to go through here. First of all, my name is Jeanette Stein, and I am the creator of algebra1teachers.com, and I have been teaching algebra everywhere from 8th grade up through 10th grade in some capacity. So I taught it to 8th grade, and those were honor students. In Michigan, we are not required to teach Algebra 1 to 8th grade. Some districts do require that. My district did not. And then I also was on the other end of the spectrum where I taught Algebra 1 to 10th graders who are really struggling. And that was down in Florida where I started my teaching career down in Newport Richey, just north of Clearwater. So I had the really, those kids who are really struggling to get through Algebra 1. And so we split it into 2 years and did a tremendous amount of activities and hands-on to really give them a strong understanding. And so that went really, really well. So before we get into some of the standards and go through all of that, I just want to go over a couple little things here. The resolution, when you hit play on here, which always feels weird, if you click on this HD button down here at the bottom, it will, the quality, I've already changed it with the last webinar, but the quality usually defaults at either 240 or 360, which will make everything very, very fuzzy for you to be able to see. And if you would like, if you're one of those people that likes to be able to read along or see what I'm pointing at or see those equations a little bit more specifically, then you're probably going to want to just go ahead and click on the 720, the HD, and it should be much more clear for you. This has been an ongoing issue for, it's come up every time that it's a little bit fuzzy. So I hope that's helpful. And then the other thing that we're going to take a look at is that chat box real quick. You guys seem to be doing great in the chat. The more people interact, it seems like the better this works. And so this is probably a little behind because I am using a separate computer so that it does not bog down our presentation for the chat. So as we go through the chat, there are a couple of things. It does require you to be logged in. So if you're one of those people, and I can see that there are those people who are not logged into the chat, I do require the login, even though it's one extra step for you, because one time I didn't do it just to make it easier for the teachers. And what ended up happening is we got, like spammers and trolls and people just wanting to comment for the reaction. And it was a really bad situation. We had to kind of pause it, and I had to reset that, and everybody had to log in. When I have everybody log in, then it just eliminates all that. So if you want to contribute, please just take a minute, log in. You can use any of those. It doesn't save your login. I'm not able to get in there for anything other than it just keeps people out who are spamming, and allows me to block people that if they did log in, then I can just, knock them out real quick. I will ask questions every so often because I think it's just more fun when everybody gets to interact. I have noticed that people end up helping each other. I did have some people on our first webinar Sunday afternoon. They ended up hooking up and helping each other out with a couple things. I just thought that was wonderful. So feel free if you're comfortable. I don't want to accidentally block Becky there. Feel free if you're comfortable, sharing and contacting each other privately. You can contact people privately through here by just clicking on this double conversation link right here at the bottom. So if you wanted to be able to ask me questions privately, I may not be able to get to them during the webinar because I am presenting, but I will be able to get to them right after if you stay on the chat for a little bit longer. And but that way you guys can communicate as well. I'm in no way control of this. You guys are all professionals, obviously. Okay, and then, whoops, that's what turns it on. Here we go. And then at the end, I have the link for your certificate, and then you're just going to fill that out, and we will be able to send that out. We will send that out in the morning. So everybody that gets a chance at the webinar today and then this evening at 8:30, and it's the exact same webinar. So if you find it useful and you need to hear it one more time, feel free to just stop right by the same link. But otherwise, first thing in the morning, we will send you a certificate. It will probably come from my assistant's email address. His name is John. And I tried to send out Sundays and I messed it up. John is much better at that kind of thing. And he gets it all set up for you, and we'll make sure that that is all correct. So be looking for that in the morning. And then I also have a great deal for you. If you're interested in joining and becoming a member, I am offering a nice special at the end too. And I'll have a coupon code for you at the end as well, right, with the certificate. So let's go ahead. It is about 8 after. I'm not seeing people coming in anymore. I'm sure people will come in and out. I know you guys have busy schedules and that some of you are fitting me in on a lunch hour you emailed. Feel free to drop me an email if you need any additional information or you had to leave early. So what we're going to cover, and it'll probably take about 30 to 45 minutes with this number of participants. With more participants, it obviously would take a little bit longer, just like in your classroom teaching a skill with the questions and so forth and comments. But what we're going to cover is understanding those standards in order to save time. And so that's going to be the big one, how we create those problem solvers so that we're not feeling like we have to touch on every nitty-gritty detail. And then some resources to make your teaching a little bit easier, and then create that personalized plan in order to get it all done. So I think it's hard for teachers. We have we're pulled in so many directions. So we want to create some sort of plan where we can get all of this done. So, and I'm going to hit refresh here because I'm not seeing your chat box. So I want to make sure that if anybody has any issues here, that I'm able to see it. Well, we'll get rid of that just 30 minutes. I'm not sure why. I'm sure it popped up because I was just switching computers there. Okay, so it sounds like a lot of us here are either 8th grade or really spread kind of thin with a lot of different grades. So we'll talk about some strategies for both of those. And if you are just now joining us, I know I didn't get a chance to greet all of you individually, but if you could just let us know what grade you teach and and maybe where you're at, just to help everybody know each other, that would be a really great way to start the webinar. There we go. That's too loud. All right. So let's start with the standards, and the standards are a little bit overwhelming. So sometimes. Now, I know in Michigan, I'm trying to think how many years ago, because time just goes way too quick, and I have little ones to make sure that everyone hears me. Welcome, Stacy. Thank you so much for taking a minute to introduce yourself. There is somebody else here. Becky is also teaching online, which might be a nice connection for you. And you're just south of me, so you're enjoying this warm weather as well. So welcome. So when we started in Michigan looking at the Common Core, Michigan was one of the first ones that kind of said they're interested, and one of the last ones that signed up. And then now they have stepped out of the assessments in Michigan. So they are using their own M-STEP assessments, and they've modeled them very closely off the Common Core. And our standards, although they wrote their own, they are the same. They are the Common Core standards. And a lot of states have done the same. So when I started my training, I remember going to these standards here, and I was able to have time, which I know a lot of us don't have time, but I was able to have time to actually read through all of the standards and given time to understand what they're talking about here. And that can be really overwhelming. But when we go ahead and look at Appendix A, I find this to be my most useful document. This is the document I come to the most often. I'm just scrolling straight down through here. This is the document I want right here. So this is the overview of the traditional pathway for the Common Core math standards. So it tells you exactly what should be taught in Algebra 1, all the way down through all these main topics. So seeing structure and expressions. Now I will point out right here, this is where one place where when I first started learning about the Common Core, I would see that this standard, interpret the structure of expressions, says linear, exponential, quadratic. You'll see over here, it's got polynomials and rational numbers. And so what I was trying to do in the very beginning when I first learned this is I would see this standard, ASSE 1A, and I apologize, I meant to make this bigger, did that earlier. But I would see the standard and I would assume that I had to teach all of it, every single thing in there. And so it got really overwhelming. When I look at this chart, I realize I don't need to in Algebra 1 teach all of it, but I do have parts of it that I need to get done. So like for example, ASSE 4, or 3, and then 4. So I needed to really kind of watch what needed to be taught in both. Now, why is that so important with so many 8th grade teachers? I'm going to continue scrolling down because what they also did here is, and I apologize for the scroll because now that I made it bigger, it's going to take just a little bit longer. So that was the traditional. And then it has these units with all of the structure, main ideas as well. So this is geometry, and then Algebra 2. What I'm looking for here is the 8th grade one. Here we go. Oh, I thought it was after the integrated. So I look at this so often that it kind of runs all together on me. Does your state use the Common Core still, or is it moving away from the Common Core? That is something I'd be interested in because as much as I try to keep up on that, it is very difficult. Here we are. So this is page 82 if you don't want to do the scrolling there. So I'm curious, does your school still use the Common Core, or are you moving to something else, kind of like Michigan has done, where it's probably relative, but not exactly the same? So when I look at the accelerated view for the 8th grade Algebra 1, this will give me the standards here. And the number one question, if you got the skills list and you're an 8th grade teacher and you said, well, the semester 2 skills list looks exactly like the Algebra 1 skills list. Yes, it does. And the reason why that is they're really, the accelerated 7th grade takes care of almost all the 8th grade standards. Here's some 8th grade standards here. There really are not that many. And so what we've done is integrated them into our curriculum. And we have done not in addition to, because of the 8th grade, but we have done instead of. So, you would take these skills out, like this overlaps with these. So we've made these lessons a little bit different than these to incorporate all of the standards so that you don't have to add days or double up lessons, because we all know kids do not retain it. So I'm just going to take a look here. Kyle says they're moving away, but they're in the process of voting on the new standards. And it seems like so many states are doing that. They're just in the process. And Heather, you're started teaching Common Core. Great. And I'm trying to remember, and Bethany, you're similar to the Common Core, but we'll have our own. And that's what Michigan is doing. But they're basically telling us teach the Common Core standards now until we figure it out, which is kind of like, okay, that sounds not very awesome. So when we take a look at the skills list, what we've been able to do, and I did open up the just the regular skills list. What we did is we took this skills list and we were able to just simplify the ideas. And the reason why we did this was because if we teach really good problem solving, then we don't need to get into every single example. So let me explain what I mean. So the standards, I put in the standards for both this 8th grade and the 9th grade for calculating slope. Now, obviously, when the skills list says calculate slope, we all understand we need to be able to compare which one's greater, which one's less than. We need to be able to figure it out, not only from a table or 2 points, but given a graph, given all those different materials. So the 8th grade one says compare properties of 2 functions, each represented in a different way, algebraically, graphically, numerically, in tables, or by verbal descriptions. For example, given a linear function represented by a table of values and a linear function represented by an algebraic expression, determine which function has the greater rate of change. So that's the 8th grade standard. Very fair. Can they figure it out from different things, and can they compare it? For the 9th grade standard, it says calculate and interpret the average rate of change of a function presented symbolically or as a table over a specified interval. Estimate the range of the rate of change from a graph. So this one is a little bit different, but when we look in, when you look at the skills list, I just numbered the skills to make it easier in my head to keep track of. This is the unit. So this is in Unit 2, which is a linear. Unit 2 focuses all on linear functions. And this is your week number so that you can always find the resources you would have worked on. Heather, no problem. No need to apologize. You just started teaching Common Core last year. That can be a hard shift if you haven't had the training on what exactly they're asking for. I don't find that teaching the Common Core is so much harder. I feel like people have been told it's all these things and nobody's defined it for them. And it makes it really overwhelming, the unknown. It makes sense a lot where they say, for the students, put a list of what we're going to be doing that day on the board. If somebody said with Common Core, you're going to be doing this, it wouldn't be so hard to do, but they're so vague. Nobody really knows what to do. So I'm hoping this will help a little bit. So when we take a look at both of these definitions, this is probably not anything more than what you're already doing. Maybe the wording. But what I notice is people get really overwhelmed because they'll put those those standard numbers into Google and they start seeing all of these different kinds of questions, and they feel like they need, with very, very good intentions of helping their students do really, really well on the assessment, they feel like they need to hit every single standard that in every single, not standard, of course you should hit every standard, but every single example of how that question could be worded or presented on the assessment. And what happens there is not only are you overwhelmed, but your students are overwhelmed. And what I would say to, in order to be able to fit it into a year, is cover one thing really, really well. So you might have them do some of those higher level thinking. And this is where, in our members area, we really have worked hard to create some resources that will help our students to understand what's going on there. So for example, if I go, should be all logged in here. I tried to make sure, but sometimes it'll log me out. We've got this brand new area for 8th grade Algebra 1 extension resources. And what we've done is created resources that are going to help you kind of replace some of that function work. So if you think, if I was teaching Algebra 1 in 9th grade, I would need to be reviewing, but not necessarily teaching for the first time, slope-intercept form, how to calculate slope, how to write things in slope-intercept form or intercept form. And being able to do all that as a 9th grade teacher, if they had the full 8th grade math curriculum, those things would have already started and I could just build on them. Where if you're teaching it in 8th grade, we really felt like you should maybe get rid of those lessons and put these ones in instead, because they go so much more in depth. So for example, we've got an activity dealing with slope. So when you go ahead and open that up, we've got our negative slope and we give them a story problem. These activities are not like get out the markers and the posters. Sometimes they do deal with blocks or algebra blocks. I have printables you can use so you're not buying stuff, or I've given you some online resources if you've got, you know, Chromebooks or iPads or whatever you've got in your classroom. But these are meant to be done in like a pair share discussion format. And then this allows students to really think deeply on a graph. What does this represent? If I'm thinking about a wall, which axis is that? If I'm thinking about a tabletop, which axis is that? And what this does is allows students to be able to really process what they're working on. So while I may not have given them every story problem from every assessment example I've seen, I've given them the knowledge and the ability to connect what they know with what is maybe one of those assessment questions. And so that is going to be really, really helpful in the future, because then when they see it on the assessment, if they have those connections, like the synapses need to connect. And once they connect, that information will be more easily, it's retained, first of all, but then more easily retrieved. So on the assessment, can they remember the connections they made when they did this activity? And that comes out really well. We all know that they also need to know the fluency, okay? And this is probably one of the biggest questions and discussions we've had. So let's make this larger too. I wish it would just default. I'll have to look that up. So yes, do they need to be able to do it with a graph? Understanding what rise and run is? Do they need to be able to look at the table? Absolutely. Interpreting different graphs and understanding under different domains where the slope is greater or smaller. They need the fluency. They need to be able to apply it then. If you give them the activity to get that deeper understanding, to discuss it, to kind of struggle through it, and then give them this where they can apply it, they should then be able to apply it in the assessment as well. So my big question is, do you tend to favor the activities in your classroom, or do you tend to favor the fluency in your classroom? Like, where do you tend to spend the most time in your classroom? So we've got the slope with the graphs, and then of course with just the points. Now the activity has talked about how do you find these points for that story problem. Okay, and then obviously there's an answer key. But this is the idea is going from that activity where they have to process, struggle through it, as well as then having that fluency practice to get through it. So I'm curious, where are you? Do you spend more time working on the fluency with your eighth graders or your online students, or do you spend more time with the activities and the applications? There we go. And the applications, because that can be a big difference. For a lot of the presentations that I've done, the two of them that I did on Sunday, a lot of people were saying that they were more into the fluency. And what I worry about with the fluency, not that there's anything wrong with that, I think it's an ebb and flow. But when you work on Kyle's answer just popped up for me, and I love that. The activities and the applications, which is wonderful. I've noticed that on years where I've maybe had more difficult students and it was easier for them to sit and work on the same thing, you know, those fluency things are kind of easier with those high maintenance classes some years. And it's one of those things you reflect on and see in yourself. It's almost hard to admit, but what I noticed is with those type of years, I would get those assessments back and they would look at, I would look at the question and be like, they know how to do this already. What in the world? Yeah, the question was worded a teeny bit different, but they know how to do this. They didn't make the connections in my classes. They needed those activities to make the connections. So maybe I'm looking at Stacy's comment. She said it's fluency. It is hard for students online to really engage in applications because they don't really have anybody to problem solve with. And I'm wondering if there's online programs or if you have enough students where they could maybe, if you use something like Edmodo or Schoology, where there's those discussion boards where they could talk back and forth. Right, at least in our setting. I get it, because I worked for 1 year as a technology integrations consultant, and it was really hard because every district has different rules on that, and for good reasons. You know, I worked in districts where they could trust their students to talk to each other privately and things were not going on that shouldn't be. And then there's other districts where they really had issues with crazy amounts of things. So it's unfortunate, but that does go on. So you have to keep the students safe, number one. So I'm not sure if they'd be able to chat with each other, but that might be one solution. Kyle and Bethany, I love that you put down that activities and applications. I wonder if you notice that the retention is there a little bit more. And so I think there needs to be a balance, and that balance can be really, really hard depending on how long your class periods are. I work with one teacher who's a member, and his classes are only 40 minutes long. And to me, I'm just like, how do you get in your content and the practice and the fluency and build them up and build some confidence in only 42 minutes? But he's doing a great job, and we've been problem solving back and forth, and he's really getting some skills down that are helping his students. But it's been really, we've really had to brainstorm it out. So that's been interesting. Yeah, so I like the activities. There is an activity for everything, for almost every lesson plan in here, unless that practice is really long. So that does add a little bit. So let's go back to our presentation here. And then the standards, we talked about this already a little bit, but do they overlap? Yes, they overlap. So double check that Appendix A. If your state's kind of moving away, but you're still using them, or you are just getting started in the Common Core. This was one of my biggest mistakes, is I was trying to teach every single standard that was listed for Algebra 1 without checking that Appendix A kind of chart. And I was trying to fit in way more than it's already a crazy amount of information that you're trying to help the students truly understand, retain, and be able to, take on. You don't need to be shoving more at them. It'd be better to go deeper into one concept and really build those problem solving skills. So what are some ways that I deal with all of these different types of problems that we see that could possibly pop up to our students in these assessments? Because unfortunately, these assessments are evaluation. And so it just seems crazy. A couple of things that I have done is taken those assessment examples and just copy and paste them right onto a worksheet and print them out for the students. And then I will ask them, can you write some different questions? How else could they have worded these questions? I will sometimes just give them, we looked at that one worksheet. I will sometimes just give them the 2 points and say, hey, if the topic's slope, what questions could we ask about this? Write a story problem that fits this. So instead of making them do every problem, I'm helping them actually connect what they already know to the problems they could come up on the assessment. Not only is this a time saver, as far as we're not working through every one of those, it's helping them connect what they already know and feel confident on. So I try to do this right after they feel really confident. Maybe I don't give them some of the harder problems. I want them to feel confident when they do this exercise, because then they will come up with some really difficult questions. And sometimes they really impress me, how difficult the questions they can come up with when they're feeling confident and they're not nervous. So I'll say, write questions that use this topic and these numbers. I will say, how are they trying to trick you? Look at these 3 questions. How are they the same? How are they different? What are they asking for? What strategies have we talked about? Anything that helps them connect those question types to the learning they've already done, without overwhelming and frustrating them. So yes, we talked about the balance with fluency. I'm not saying don't give them the practice, but really using that last 5 minutes, last 10 minutes of class really well to do some of those connections. And this really helps some of my struggling readers who would get very, very intimidated by story problems not be so intimidated. So I will also ask them, what do you notice? What do you notice about these questions? What do you notice about the strategy? What do you notice? Anything, because when you say, what do you notice, that's now connecting it not only to the math, but a lot of times, and I strongly encourage them, do they notice something that it connects to another class? So a lot of the vocabulary, they don't realize it, but in English, I'm trying to think, we were talking about inverses, and they read a short story that had the word inverse in it, and it was talking about going, turning around and going the other way. And so our English teacher worked on, they wrote directions to the office, and then they wrote the directions from that classroom to the office, and then they wrote the directions from the office back to the classroom. And that really helps solidify, if you went into the office turning left, when you come out, you go right. And then 2 days later in my classroom, we actually calculated the inverse of some of those more difficult things. And then I said, what do you notice? And it was amazing to me how few students put it together until I helped them put it together. So this will really help you to realize what they're connecting and what they're not connecting. And that's huge. If they can connect it, they can retain it and probably recall it. So the other thing I like them to do is, how does this fit with what we learned yesterday, last week, and last year? And this sounds like it's going to take more time, but it improves the retention so much. And it helps them remember what they did in 8th grade. So I'll say, or your 7th grade. How did your 7th grade teacher say this? How did your 8th grade teacher say this? How do I say it? Which one's better? Why? How should we say it? Are there mathematical terms we should put in here? All of those types of questions, even though this could take 2 or 3 minutes at the end of a lesson, it really improves the retention and will save you time, because you're not going to spend so much time reteaching. If they can connect it to 8th grade and recall what they did in 8th grade, and the terminology, those trigger words that they used in 8th grade, 7th grade. I keep saying 8th grade because for the last 7 years I've taught 9th grade. Before that I was in 8th grade. So, but the year before. So if they can connect it to the year before, how often do you say, did you ever learn this? And they're like, no. And you're like, the teacher before, you taught it. And sometimes you were the teacher before, because I actually went from 8th grade in the same district to 9th grade and had some of those same students. And they'd be like, yeah, you never taught us it. I'm like, excuse me? Yes, I did. So I started asking this question just because I got frustrated in it. I was amazed at how much time it saved. with the retention and me knowing their trigger words to help them retain and be able to recall that information. So we've got those activities and fluencies. You know, a couple things to talk about with the activities. I realize it's already 35 after. Thank you so much for staying with me. So if I'm up at the top and I look at this top bar right here, the one thing to help you find different activities and fluency practices is just to hit that search bar. So I noticed a couple of people signed up. I'm trying to think. If you are a member and you are logged in on the site, when you search for something like linear functions, you will not only get just the members area or just not the members area, but you're going to get everything that deals with linear functions. So you'll see every worksheet, every performance task, every blog post that has to deal with linear functions, which is wonderful. The nice thing, I hooked it up so that when you search here, it'll turn it orange for you, because we have so much stuff on the on here that I was worried that things weren't being found. So if you are not a member, you still can find a lot of resources over here on the right-hand side. If you are a member, if it's a members menu, it'll always be on the left just to help you, just be able to keep that straight. So if I go into linear equations on this unit 2, and I do apologize, we had a snowstorm and then a huge thaw in the water, and the underground lines has slowed down my internet a bit. But this unit 2, this is free for anybody down the right-hand side. All of these are free. The only thing is these are things that I've collected from around the internet, and these links change so often. So if you are a member, everything is created is original, and it is there, and it is mine, and it is my PDF and my Word document. You can download that and have it forever. When you're a member, you get downloading rights. You share that with your students. You put them on Edmodo or Stacy on whatever online platform you're using to share your stuff. But if you go into the free materials, the only thing is I can't guarantee that these links will still be here. So while I've given you some ideas of some different activities and things that will really help, most of these, if it's like illustrative mathematics, those are great. PBS had a ton of stuff that were great activities, hands-on, get the kids really into it. And they all their links are still free, but they changed all the links and they didn't keep them the same. And so, things like that, I'm constantly going in and trying to update them. But obviously for the members, those ones get first priority, and everything there is, original and mine, and you won't have to worry about that. There are online resources as well. So if we've created an online resource, I'll give you that online link with everything that we've got going on. There we go. So there's lots of activities there. And then in the fluency, so creating those problem solvers and keeping them with the activities. So when you look at your skills list now, as you go through and you take a look at the big picture, I would think at this time of year, unless you're, my kiddos here in high school are on trimesters and they're starting a brand new trimester tomorrow. So unless it's you, you're probably not needing to do the review from unit 1. And unit 2 is that linear. We got slope, inverse function. Okay. Unit 3, line of best fit, correlation coefficient. And then unit 4, statistics. So when you take a look through these and you print them out, go through and cross out what you've covered, and this will help you understand what you have not covered. So let's say you need to understand a little bit about outliers. Now you know unit 4, week 12, and you can go right into the website right here, and you've got unit 4, and you can skip right to week 12 and be able to look at any of the activities we've got. Or as a member, week 12, unit 4, you can go through and download everything, and you'll have everything all set up and you've got a plan there already for yourselves. So this is a really nice way to get through and make sure that you've got a plan for what you've got to do next. And then remember, you don't need to teach every single example that's coming up, because you're going to build problem solvers instead by using some of those questions. So those big picture topics, take a look at those. Do you need to hit every single bullet for everything that possibly could be there? Probably not. You're probably going to be going better off doing an activity and going deeper than you are spending all your time on fluency. Now, I would think that Stacy, and I just blanked on who else was doing the online. That's going to be a different challenge. So maybe we could brainstorm some ways for you to get that connection in. And we talked quite a bit about the activities. I added that slide because on one of them, I kind of scoured over it. So if you would like to join us in the members area, what I did is I created a coupon code so that you could start today for just $9.97 and check it out, because I know everybody is different and everybody has different needs. And so because of that, there's never an obligation to stay. You could come in just for 1 month, download what you need, and head out. Just drop me an email and let me know. And you can unsubscribe at any time. And then if not, then you do get the special subscriber pricing of $39 instead of the $49 that is our list price. So if you do decide to stay, that would only be $39. The other thing that's in the members area, this is something that's really helpful for you to have the trainings and the PD hours and all of that is we do have other trainings available, and they are all right here. And I know we do have some members here in the chat. And so when you click, let's say you've been at the webinar or the training, once you've checked them off, there's always, you can just download that certificate. So I've tried to make that as easy as possible, because I know the last thing you need is to be emailing me for the certificate and all that stuff. Today, you'll just have to fill out a quick form and it'll be all done. But if you're a member and you haven't taken advantage of that, that's a great way to just be able to download the certificate right after watching the training. And it has the number of hours and the title and what you've learned right on that certificate. So if you'd like to join today, you can just hit that red button below and then put in that coupon code. Actually, I almost forgot. My assistant helped me out. You don't even need that coupon code there. When you go to that link, it will say the first month is $9.97 and then the next month is just $39. And so if you choose to stay, remember there is no obligation, but you do get the training. And then the other common question I get is, do we get full access to everything as soon as we join? Yes, you do. So there's no holding back. Just because you paid $9.97, I'm not going to give you just a piece of it. Everybody is in a different spot in their teaching. That would just be impossible. And I want to show you the full membership so that you can take a look around and see if it's a good fit for you. I know every school is different, so please know that I understand that. And then it includes all of the resources and trainings. The other question I got, and I think I hit on this a little bit earlier, is am I allowed to share it online, like in Schoology or Edmodo or, one of the millions of other online content sharing? If that's just with your students, absolutely. The only restriction I have is just to not be out there, putting it like on your own website. So if you're using it for instructional purposes, absolutely, you are certainly allowed to put a link to that. And then if you do become a member, there's the one training that really talks about great ways to share this with your students is how to get organized. And I share some great ways to take these links right from in the members area and put them on some resources that you can share with your students to make it really easy for them to have them online. So that's a great one right there, that webinar, How to Get Organized in 2016. And then, of course, there's a certificate for that one as well. I know your time is precious, so I try to be very respectful of that. And then for your certificate today, what I'm going to do is type this right into the chat box so that you don't even have to type it in if you don't want to. But what you can do is go right in and hit this link. And what it's going to do is just ask you, there we go. Because I wasn't chatting, it logged me out here. So just typing this in. And there is a link right there to get your certificate. All it's going to ask you for is your, there we go, is your name, and then your name, so that your name goes on the certificate, and your email so that I can email it to you in the morning. So all you need to do there is put your name and your email in, and you will be all set, and I will get that to you in the morning, or my assistant will get that to you first thing in the morning. So what we're going, I'm wondering is what do you think about all this information? And if you have any questions, I notice I'm quite a bit ahead of you. The Google Hangouts has slowed down a little bit while we've been on. But I'm wondering if you have any questions, or if there's anything I can help you with before we head out today. Well, I am so grateful that you are here. I'm going to stick around just in case with this delay. I've noticed in some schools, especially, the delay's a little longer if your internet's a little bit slow. So I'm going to stick around for the next 5 minutes, but I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for coming. It was a lot of fun to get to know you a little bit. Stacy, if you want to brainstorm some ways to work through that application, how they could do that with the devices they've got, feel free to let me know, or even drop me an email. You can always, I meant to tell you, you can always reach me just by clicking on my email address right here at the top. And so feel free to reach out to me privately if you prefer. I always love to hear from you guys, because that way I know what you're thinking, and I can make resources that benefit you. So let me know if you need anything. And thanks again for coming.